Welcome to the Hard-Won Wisdom Podcast with best-selling author Fawn Germer and corporate innovator Michelle Brigman. Come here weekly for career and life-changing conversations with some of today's most influential thought leaders, senior executives, and trailblazers who will share their mentoring wisdom. This podcast is brought to you by the Women's Leadership Network.
Hi, I'm Fawn Germer.
And I'm Michelle Brigman.
And this is the Hard-Won Wisdom Podcast. This season, we are focusing on how we settle for less in our lives, in our relationships, our careers, in our experiences for ourselves. And today, what we want to talk about is lost passions. These are the things that you used to do and you used to love doing them. And over time, you started doing them less and less until you aren't even doing them at all. You may have loved writing or music. Maybe it was dancing or tennis. We can give you a list of a million things, but you're the one who knows what it is that you stopped doing that you really enjoyed at one point in your life. So we want to talk about how you can bring those good energy activities back into your world. And helping us do that today is our guest, who will help you tap into that lost passion and bring it back to life. So Erin Risius has been helping people to live happier, healthy lives for more than 25 years. She's a mental health and wellness professional who's licensed professional counselor, wellness coach, speaker, and health educator. So Erin, welcome.
Welcome.
Yay.
Thank you. Great to hear.
Do you have any lost passions like we're talking about?
Yes. It's funny. I was thinking about this topic before today. I'm like, what's my own situation with that? 2020 pandemic. For me, it was a hard look at what was serving or not serving me and where in my life where I stepped away from my passion, which was mountain living. So my lifestyle surrounds trail running, mountain biking, being in the mountains in some way, shape, or form. So it was a big move. And that was one of the reasons, but a big one of really aligning with where I find my passion and restoration is being in the mountains. So I went through this. I've been through it many times over the years, but definitely most recently in 2020 of actually kind of moving toward a place that allows me to play. So yeah, absolutely.
Michelle, what about you?
Country dancing. Oh my gosh, I love country western dancing and I don't do it anymore. And I'm like desperate to do it. I'm convinced I could still be fabulous, but I don't know. I got to go. And stargazing. I used to love to go at night and stargaze. And then I think being in Dallas, and then being in Dallas, it's not exactly prime location to get a clear view of the stars.
Yeah, but it's a good one for country and western dancing.
Yes, it is. But I am not taking advantage of it. I miss it.
Yeah, I think we're in that category of things that we kind of miss that, but we have full active lives and it's not like we're suffering hugely. But I have noticed over the years, just when I see people at speeches and they start to share things that really defined them, that they loved, that they were passionate about, and they got too busy with life. And Michelle's like you were saying earlier, it's just a little bit at a time. Suddenly that passion has left your life. And Erin, why does this happen?
Gosh, a lot of reasons. This is a topic that's popped up in sessions with my counseling work with women of kind of having lost sight of what feeds them from the inside out. So I do a lot of work with relationship with food. And there's a term I use called spiritual hunger. And spiritual hunger is feeling deprived of a sense of passion and pleasure and joy. And we can sidestep that. And then it's like the lobster and it's boiling, we don't even know that it's happening until all of a sudden we're just so far removed from what really ignites that sense of fire and inspiration and joy. And there's many reasons. And just to name a few, it can be getting caught up in the busyness of life, survival mode versus thriving. And survival mode is an autopilot of working. If, for some people, it's family caregiving. It's a lot of caregiving in their roles. I work a lot with medical providers, and they work long hours in their days. And so 10 to 12 hour shifts where there's just, where's the time? So it could be just stepping away due to the busyness of life, lack of time, sense of survival mode. It could just be that the priorities have shifted. There's also a sense of, we can dive into this later, but a sense of worthiness around allowing good in. I see that a lot. I also see a sense of feeling selfish, of allowing, sources of pleasure and hobbies and activities and interests.
Stop. We have to take these one at a time.
I know. I was standing in line once, and this woman, I overheard this woman, and her and her friend were talking about, she's like, do you like to read? And her friend was like, I love to read, but I feel like that's such a luxury I don't have anymore, that who has the time, And so that becomes like an example of, it's so easy to just relegate it to someday rather than today, So.
Yeah. So the worthiness, though, is that's interesting, because you're putting everybody else and what they expect and want of you before the things that you need to satisfy that spiritual hunger. Correct?
Correct.
I didn't dance because my man, he didn't like to dance and he didn't want me to dance. And so like that, instead of like, get your butt and let's go learn, or I'm going to go anyway, or I'm going to go with my, it was, well, I'm going to accommodate their preference, which is that's just a repeated pattern with me. And so many of the things I've given up, and I hear that a lot.
Yes. Yeah. It's very common. Yeah. It's going along to get along. And I think sometimes it's just, I don't want to put someone out. I don't want to burden her. I'll do this on my own, but then we don't. And it can certainly add fuel to that fire. Yeah.
When I was my big trip this summer, I went and I saw a friend who actually was the reason I got into cycling. She was such a badass on a bicycle. And I thought, maybe we can go climb a mountain or something. And I said, hey, are you still cycling? And in the interim, she'd gotten married. And she says, nah. And I said, well, why not? She goes, well, he doesn't do it. And I'm like, so? Like, yeah, what? And she goes, he doesn't bike. Well, did he try? He just doesn't like it. And I said, so why can't you? And she just looked at me and she goes, well, I want to be with him. Which is different, I think, in a way. She's consciously saying this, he's more important than that. I don't get it, but I thought that was, that would be like you picking the thing that you did most and were best known for, and then saying, no, I'd rather be with this other person. Does that happen?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And for some people that's okay and it works. For others, it ends up being self-sacrifice. Like they're sacrificing something that really brings so much joy and happiness, and it's just not worth it. And for others, it's a conscious choice, and they enjoy being with another where they can do a common activity together. So it becomes such a personal decision, and it really becomes this audit of, and when women come to me and they're like, gosh, I feel so far removed from what brings me pleasure and joy, and I don't even know where to start. I'll hear that so often because they've gotten caught up in life and distractions. And don't feel like there's time or energy, or they're just kind of feeling clueless of like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what brings me pleasure. And so then it becomes this place of asking the question of, well, what did you used to do that you're not doing now that you used to enjoy? What is it that you wish you could be doing that you're maybe putting on hold for someday? And so those are a couple of questions to ask that help bring people back to, well, what is it that I could do what is one thing that I could start doing that will help to realign me or to cultivate a new a way in which to do pleasurable activities and to explore passions. I think that word passion, sometimes you're like, I don't know what I'm passionate about. And so that question can kind of put a lot of pressure on discovering that. But really, I like the word curiosity. Like, what are you curious about learning? What are you curious about experimenting with? And then that can maybe lend itself to something that someone finds that they're passionate about. But it's really about stepping into, well, what did I used to do that I might not be doing? What am I curious about? What are some of the things, like your example, both of your examples, that I am not doing because the people in my circle of trust they don't want to do it. So how can I do it on my own if that's really important to me? So it certainly is a process of exploration.
I had a recent experience with this, going back and revisiting something. So growing up, I took piano lessons. I took piano lessons for 13 years and I was good at playing piano. And then I stopped. And I owned a piano, but I remember my son, who is now 24, one day he walks in and I'm playing the piano and he's probably 20. And he goes, I didn't know you played. Because I didn't even touch it. And that was like one moment, didn't really do much more with it. And then about a year ago, I realized, like, I turned on some classical music, which I rarely listen to anymore, but I used to. And it just it filled my soul. I just loved it. And I decided I'm going to start taking piano lessons again just to get me back doing it. So I set up my lessons. I was really excited. I got in there and I realized I do not want to take piano lessons. What I really was missing, I didn't need to go recreate where I was, but what I missed listening to classical music. So now that's what I do, and how my kind of that passion or feeling of fullness and happiness has shifted. But I really had to go back and revisit where I left off and what I thought I left behind to rediscover what it was. It was really the music that moved me more than the act of playing. So just as a thing for our listeners to think about, it doesn't have to look exactly like it did back in the day. Your friend that was the cyclist, maybe she gets really excited hosting the party for the Tour de France, that everybody comes in and watches it and she can participate that way. And it's not as much about being on the bike as the cyclist. I don't know. Just.
All right. So thinking about that, I think I've sacrificed a lot for my dog because, if I'm going to bike, I need to be doing that first thing in the morning, but he's a big boy and he needs a big walk. So he gets that time. And so I don't bike and I don't do those early morning beach walks, which if it were later, it'd be too hot. I don't know what's going on with my camera here. People at home, it is turning me green and orange and all of these colors, but let's call it the Halloween episode. I met a woman once and she said, I have nothing that I'm passionate about. I just wish I had a passion. And I think she was trying to figure out a career change. I said, well, what are you passionate about? She goes, nothing. And I said, well, not nothing. There's something. And she goes, so we're going through the whole list. What about reading? What about gardening? I'm going through athletics, everything. And the answer was nothing. And is that just a sign of depression, or are there people who are really passionate about nothing?
Again, that word passion, I think a question for her, I would ask, what are you curious about? Language is powerful. And so we can interpret it in different ways. But sometimes, just to go back to your point, people are so out of touch with what brings them pleasure and joy. And yep, there could be depression happening. I will see that with depression, where anything that we used to do that did spark that sense of joy is just flat. It's just flatlined. And so that's where some counseling and some support around that can help to kind of pull us out of that. But other people, they just, for whatever reason, might not have had the time. Again, the worthiness piece, feeling like I deserve to have pleasure and to have joy and to have sources of activities that take time just for me, I'll often hear from women how selfish they feel to align with what it is that they need and want and enjoy. The thinking that I'll hear about is that if I put my needs first or my pleasure first, then what happens is that someone else's needs or pleasure is going to get sacrificed. So it becomes either or rather than both and. So it's going to be dependent upon the person, but that is definitely something I've heard over the years.
So say that again, because like I'm stuck on what you just said, because it goes back to that scarcity mindset. If I do something for me, that means that I am taking away or sacrificing something for someone else. Like, is that? I mean, like, I don't know. That just like hit me really hard. As if that, what is it? That pie is a set size and there's no room for expansion or change or whatever. It's either I'm taking care of me or it's taking away from somebody else. I don't know. That like hit me.
Yeah. And very common. I see this. I work with a lot of caretakers, people in caretaking service-oriented professions and women who we're programmed to be selfless. I mean, again, there's always a bell curve and there's outliers, but typically, culturally, we are programmed to put other people's needs first. And it's subliminal, it's overt. So depending on our family upbringing, it could be an extra layer of that. Depending on our current situation, our relationship and family, if we have one, it could be another layer. So it becomes important to understand, if it becomes either I'm taking care of my needs and myself and my interests. If I see this a lot with parents, where it becomes all about the kids and no taking time for self, but they're not modeling something that's very important to model for kids is that, hey, my self-care matters. And this is how I practice self-care. It becomes maybe focused on what the child needs. And what happens is that adult, the parent becomes further removed from what does make them outside of being a parent, that sense of, are you, who am I? What is my identity outside of that role? And I see this with caregivers. What is my identity outside of showing up in other people, in service of other people's needs? And there's a nobility in being selfless. I think that becomes the mindset. And it's also can be a trap. It also begs the question of, what is it that we get our sense of worth and our sense of inspiration from? Where's our self and in this self-care? And that becomes really a rewiring the programming as far as allowing in what those activities might be to help facilitate that sense of feeling fulfilled and feeling a sense of pleasure in our day-to-day. I usually ask people a question, hey, in your typical day, if you have two columns, one column is your everyday to-dos, responsibilities, write those down or think about it. And usually it's a long list. As adults, we have responsibilities. And then the other column is, what are your sources of pleasure and joy? Now, when I would teach a class on this topic around spiritual hunger, and usually that column of pleasure and joy would be pretty short and the other one would be pretty long, or it'd be completely nothing in that column where people I got nothing. I don't even know what to put in there. And so it's really about kind of assessing and auditing, okay, what am I doing or not doing now? And then how can I maybe create more of a balance between these two columns and really bring in some of those activities that I used to do or that are fun or that certainly have sparked curiosity as far as experimenting with. And then it's really how to balance that. Not going to be equally balanced. There's going to be ebbs and flows in life. But if it's completely non-existent or there's one or two things only, then it really invites that question of why and what can we do to help to shift that.
I had one that was significant because, y'all know that I'm a big outdoors woman and that I love to camp. But the older I got, the less my friends were willing to camp. And so I went several years a lot of years without going at all. And I love to be outdoors like that. And finally, I had to make a decision that I wasn't going to be afraid to do something that was always a group activity and do it by myself. And so I said, okay, I'm just going to try it this one time. And I made a reservation in this campground, and I took my dog and I set up my tent, and a thunderstorm started within an hour, massive. And I was in the tent. I was like, this is awesome. And that was pretty much going to be the worst thing that could happen, except, a psycho killer. But, you realize that in campgrounds, generally you don't see them because there are a lot of people in a close environment. So not only did I get to do this activity that I loved, and I was free to do this wherever, right? Suddenly the world was open to me, but also I had incredible power and strength from having done it by myself and having been brave enough to do something alone that I'd always had people with. And, I go camping with friends, frequently, but I really love when I'm by myself because that's strong. And so if you don't have people doing the things you used to do with people, that's not a reason not to do it. Just do it by yourself. I mean, Michelle, could you do a line dance alone without the line?
I don't want to do a line dance. I want a two-step. I want to walk. So but yes, technically, yes, I could go to a dance hall by myself 100%. Now, I was going to ask, so we've been talking a little bit about the challenge that women have and some of the drivers. Like, what would be an indication that this is what's going on, my spiritual hunger versus like I've got some feelings. How do I know this is where I should explore versus, I don't know, something different?
It really becomes, again, going back to that phrase of like a life audit, evaluating a kid. What am I doing and not doing and why? So sometimes it's as simple as time. It's as simple as, gosh, I'm just getting into the autopilot busyness of life and I just stepped away and I need to bring it back in, and one step at a time, finding pockets of self-care and certainly pleasurable activities. Other times it's, I'm overwhelmed, I'm depressed, I'm stressed, I'm overworked, I'm burnt out, I'm not feeling it today. I'd rather just turn on Netflix and numb out and kind of escape rather than doing those activities that really fill someone up from the inside out. Social media, TV, and again, I think it all has its place, and we could do it in a way that feels enjoyable, pleasurable, and entertaining. And when it gets into that place of numbing and doing those things instead of maybe the ways in which we feel, I don't know, enlivened, like Fawn, when you're talking about camping and just, that experience of being solo and being with self, for many can feel very daunting if that's not something that they're used to, but it's invigorating if we allow ourselves to do it. It can be. It certainly is. But I see this a lot, especially with people who are coupled or who are just used to being a part of a group or just not doing, and with women particularly, it's like, I want to have someone to do something with. I don't want to do X alone. I want to do it with anyone but myself. That's tricky because what happens is we tend to, again, find those reasons to not do something rather than the reasons to do something. So, but, again, going back to your question, Michelle, I think it could be the sense of fear and habit and numbing and, well, this person doesn't want to, all those things. But it could also just be a deeper layer of that, again, that worthiness. A sense of, do I deserve pleasure? And that becomes a deeper question. I usually find that those are tied closely to depression. And this is where working with a counselor can help with, peeling back the onion of those questions of, well, what does it mean to feel worthy? And what would that look like? What would the next step be? Because those are deep, big questions. And it can feel overwhelming of like, gosh, I don't even know where to start. So then it becomes how to really make it an accessible and manageable way to step into that sense of reclaiming, our own worth around allowing the good in, allowing pleasurable activities into our lives. So there'll be different strategies for each, for sure.
If you are paired up with someone who does not like something that's taking your time, but this is something that's important to you, whether it's two-stepping or, taking classes at night or whatever, how do you find the way to set a boundary and say, no, I have to do this for me?
When we create boundaries, first of all, I find that it's twofold. It's a boundary with ourselves, like putting our needs first. It may feel foreign. Again, we're pushing against that programming of, hey, my needs matter. So there's that of like holding our own selves accountable and making sure that that's a priority, not a negotiable. So basically, making sure that there's intention around, I'm going to do this on this day at this time, even if I'm feeling selfish or guilty. I hear the guilt word a lot when it comes to women trying to bring this back into their lives. So there's that boundary with self, accountability with self. That's really important. But the other thing is when we start to assert needs and prioritize activities and personal pleasures and those kinds of things, it can be met with resistance with loved ones if they're not used to that, or if they feel like their time is going to be, or their needs are going to be shifted to maybe lower in the priority list, So the boundary piece around that is about just having a conversation. And again, it depends on the skill set of the other person on having a healthy discussion. But really it's just talking, hey, I usually tell people, start with this phrase, I really need your help with something. I want to bring two-step. I want to bring two-step back in my head.
Right.
That's right. I want to bring two-step back into my life. I miss it. I really want to learn it or whatever. And I know that that's not your thing, but I found a class this night and I'm going to do that for 4 weeks and just check it out. Is that okay? I'm going to scratch that. Is that okay? Because we don't want to try and get permission, but it's like, I just really love your support because it's something that means a lot to me. It's almost like how to lay the foundation of this is what I need. This is how you can help me. Often I find human nature is we want to help other people, but not always. There's no absolutes here. But often that's like, oh yeah, I can help you with that. And I support you in that. But it's really about stating the need, asking for help and supporting that need, and then holding our own self accountable and fulfilling that need. That's the last step to make sure that we don't, make it a negotiable.
Good tactics. I like your point about effective communication also is determined by the skill set of the other person. I caught that.
Yeah.
You did, you brought up social media, which, thinking about that as an aside, I think that has been so destructive to how we spend our time because it's so easy to get lost and waste time. And so, when you're talking about doing a lot, your own life audit, it's also important to do a time audit, right? Because then you see where things are getting wasted.
Yeah. Often I'll hear from clients where if something's really important that they want to bring into their lives, they're like, I just don't have time. Okay. Do you watch TV? Are you on? Yes. How much time? So then I will ask them and not to judge and kind of, shame. It's more of like, well, how to not undo those things that might be enjoyable, but what amount of time could be taken away from those activities if they're happening, or whatever activity is more numbing and it's kind of maybe can be negotiated as far as how much time we spend doing them to allocate to something that's more meaningful. So it's what's tricky here is as humans, we crave we're all or nothing mindset people. We crave black and white, certainty, uncertainty is uncomfortable. Middle ground is uncomfortable. So that's where habits form because it's like we're all in or all out or all good or all bad. And it becomes very familiar. When we step into unfamiliar territory, which exploration and experimentation is, especially around pleasures and passions and curiosity, that requires a sense of kind of almost faith and trust in self to, maybe not everything that we try and experiment with is going to land your piano example, Michelle, is like, well, God, I realized that, hey, it's not really playing the piano, it's listening to the music that I miss. And so that becomes the data that we gather in this process of exploration of, well, what is it that I do want to bring in, that I do miss, that does fill me up? And there's no judgment as much as, again, that curiosity of collecting the data and seeing how certain things land, and then tweaking it as we go along. But it is a process for sure, and a fun one, hopefully. Gosh.
Yeah, there was a movie that I just love. It's called Shirley Valentine, old movie. And
Shirley, maybe watch it on a trip.
Did I make you watch that?
Yes, we watched it.
It's like my top 3 movies of all time: Shirley Valentine, Sound of Music, and Thelma and Louise. You cannot beat any of those. Yeah. Right. But Shirley, Shirley hits 40 and she is confronting herself with, what she had allowed her life to become, this colorless life with a man who didn't appreciate her. And she's like, screw it. And she just goes to Greece and realizes that, just the mere act of making that decision gave her power. And that as she went through this adventure, and she ends up staying there. I spoiled this movie for everybody who should watch it, but she ends up staying in Greece. And that because she was going to be Shirley the Magnificent. And I think sometimes we get so busy with life that we don't notice it starts to lose its color, and that you're living more in black and white. And that when you make the decision that you deserve more and you're going to take action toward that, then your life fills with color and energy and happiness. And really, if somebody in your life can't handle you doing that, maybe you have to question why that person's even there. So she goes to Greece and finds herself. And the last scene is the husband shows up in Greece and they have dinner at the seaside. Now, did they get back together? You don't know.
We don't know.
He had to come to her world. And I love the power of that movie, because it says that, for so many different themes, but it was that, as you age, and for her, it was aging into her 40s, is that you start to look and see, boy, I used to really have a lot more going on when I was younger. And all it takes to change that is the decision to say, I want more. And what's it going to take to bring back, in her case, Shirley the Magnificent? It's you have to do that at the risk of a relationship, or else you lose the relationship with yourself.
Oh, yes. I love that. We don't want to leave ourselves to be with someone else or something else or some career. All we got is ourselves. And those parts can be part of what invites pleasure and joy. Absolutely. But hopefully not at the sacrifice of what's important to our own mental, emotional well-being. Completely agree. I love that story.
And then, since I mentioned that about, following up with what you said about social media, I want to ask you about this one too, which is, it's really not just social media, it's the internet. So we're not always dealing with Facebook and all of that stuff. But when you throw in the internet, that also includes the news. And I think we're at a scary moment in time where the world is crazy. People in this country, crazy. And if we take the time to do those things that are away from that, doesn't that fill us with better mental health?
Absolutely. It's recentering, it's grounding. When life is happening around us, and it always is, in our own personal worlds, and certainly culturally and globally, there's a lot going on. And because of the news, we're privy to so much information, it can feel overwhelming and stressful. And that makes it even more important to make sure that, gosh, what are the ways in which we're escaping some of this, and not through the doom scrolling on social media?
Right.
Or what is that's one of the things I'm like, like, okay, step away from the phone. And it's really about how to, again, tap into what invites calming and centering, joy and pleasure, and really prioritizing those things. And it doesn't have to be for an extended period of time. Often what people are like, I don't have an hour, 2 hours. Like, you know what? Again, I work with a lot of professionals who have long days and packed schedules and families, and their time is limited. And so it becomes all or nothing. Well, if I can't do what I used to do, then I'm not going to do anything at all as far as what I find fun. But then we talk about how to find those pockets of pleasure, those pockets of time that allow for the breather in between responsibilities or in between the snippets of news. Like how to step away and regroup. And so as little as 5 minutes doing something, it really does matter. It really does help. I mean, something will always be better than nothing here. And it's about that practice of getting out of the all or nothing mindset, or it's not going to look exactly like how it used to look, but how to prioritize that and make it a non-negotiable so that there's something that there's almost like a touchstone, a way in which to kind of return to. So whether it's 5-10 minutes in the morning with a cup of coffee, 5 to 10 minutes in the evening with whatever, with self, with family, with whatever feels pleasurable on the weekends, how lunchtime, what are those ways in which to kind of tap in and tune in and you know, it makes all the difference. Makes all the difference.
Well, that has been very helpful. Michelle, how about some nuggets from what we had today?
Well, I love the reminder. It was a great conversation and good reminder because I think it's so easy for us to fall in this trap to the point from all of our lives. But you talked about like, be aware that if you find yourself feeling numb, stress eating, overwhelmed, depressed, that it might be that you actually have a spiritual hunger. This could be it. So what you can do first is you can do this life audit. And just to recap what that was, one of the practices you mentioned, Erin, was to write out a list of what are your pleasure sources, joy sources, and then what are your lists of to-dos, and just reflect, not without judgment, just reflect and see what you uncover from that. And then when you ask yourself, right, what's missing, go back and figure out where are some areas that you're curious about. Maybe it's something from your past. Maybe it's something you've never done and been interested in trying, but go experiment, learn from that, and then adjust as needed. And Fawn, you made a really great, powerful comment, and that is we want to live our lives in color. So do more of the things that bring color to your life. And I think this is a great reminder that with as little as 5 minutes a day, we can reclaim that color and live full. So thank you for a great conversation and great tips.
Really, it's always a pleasure having you here, Erin. So thank you twice on this season. We'll have you next season too. So
that's great.
Thank you, Erin. Oh, wait, tell people how they can get you for their fabulous therapist.
Oh, gosh. Well, probably just go to my website. It's erinrisius.com. So it's ERINRISIUS.com.
And she's the best.
Awesome.
Erin, thank you very much. We'll see you again.
Thank you for joining the Hard-Won Wisdom Podcast with best-selling author Fawn Germer and corporate innovator Michelle Brigman. Join us weekly for career and life-changing conversations with some of today's most influential thought leaders, senior executives, and trailblazers who will share their mentoring wisdom. This podcast is brought to you by the Women's Leadership Network. Visit hardwonwisdom.com for more on this podcast and for links to Fawn and Michelle's web pages and social media. Also, be sure to rate, subscribe, and review wherever you listen to your podcasts. We really appreciate that effort, and we'll see you next week.